tracking their careers and noting the fact that they, have really been around for some major changes in that area would be an interesting journal article, and we could use this interview as a starting point for that. So that's just out there now. That in addition to the January recap that Brian and I did podcast, so we'll continue to do those quarterly recaps, which seem to be well received, and look for more podcast ideas that are of this type of substance that we can turn into other types of communications materials like in the journal. So always looking for those ideas. Again, the launch of the database and getting all of that going is certainly taking up more time than we always expect. And so wish we had more podcasts always, but we'll, as our plates thin out, as the database continues to become more steady, and as Caroline becomes more comfortable with the events side of her position, we'll be able to start working on communications plans with that as well.
As far as district bar meetings, we had two, I believe, this past quarter, one in Smithfield and the other in Newburgh. And so, we're, again, that's just kind of that constant effort by the officers as well as the staff that go down and make those presentations to district bars. I believe they were both well received, and it's an opportunity to share, again, the message of the state bar, the work with the state bar, and the things that really matter to the lawyers, particularly with regards to updates and new developments at the state bar. We were intending to get a bit more communication with judicial district bars, especially with regards to the portal. And I think that's to Peter's point. The database, once it kind of starts ironing out a little bit and frees up our time, we're gonna make a lot more of those efforts. But hopefully, a lot of folks have been on the new member portal and have seen the different things you can do and see the improvement that it is. Building technology improvements. Peter, is there anything?
Well, we have a new IT person here at the bar. Jeff Hill, who'd been here for a long time, had a offer for different employment that he couldn't turn down. And we were happy to see his advancement, but it was, again, another thing we had to deal with in terms of a switch. But our new IT person, Mike Ostagai, is here, and he's been working with me on getting proposals and getting ideas for the different types of courtroom improvements that we have, that we need, starting with some of the basic fundamentals, functionality of hardware that we need to make sure that we are just consistently working, some of the things that are failing just for their age, and then trying to take that next step of improving our ability to have live streams and all of those things. And so we have in the budget this year that was approved money from the North Carolina State Bar Foundation to do some courtroom upgrades. And so we are hopeful that, especially in between these quarterly meetings, we'll be able to get some real solid proposals on improvements that we can put in the large courtroom that will let us to present evidence, present materials, stream things to the monitors with a lot more ease than we have now, and a lot more consistency, and be able to make those improvements throughout the year. So we're in a good place for that. It's just it is a project that amongst all the other projects, also we have to just juggle the time for that. But I think that will still take place this year. We'll have a good plan in place and start to use that funding to make those improvements.
That would be our first quarter recap.
Okay, all right. And then moving on now, we need a report from the Publications Editorial Board.
So
It's kind of hard to report when we haven't met yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Understandable.
I
Okay.
don't know what to
Table that.
report, except that we're meeting tomorrow. And if anyone is not on the editorial board and they want to join us, they'd be welcome to sit in. I guess I can say that one of the things we talked about that kind of ties into this, and I don't really know what committee is better to take it and run with it, but Linda McGee and I have been talking about doing a podcast and getting help from Mark maybe, and then tying it into an article of 3 what I'll call trailblazers, 3 women trailblazers that have recently retired. And like she and Pat Timmons, wait, what's her last name? Goodson, sorry. And then Anna Calabria. So she suggested those 3, but she's going to help do that. And I think it's a matter of pulling it together. But a good question would be, should we do it through this committee or should we do it through the publications committee? Either way, it doesn't matter. But I
Right.
do think we need Mark to be part of it. I mean, we obviously need Mark to be part of it. He's going to be doing the podcast.
And I guess the question would be, do you want it to be an article that we do a podcast on the article, or do you want the article to be based off the podcast? And so.
I guess if you have input on what you think would be
Right.
better, I'm open to that, but what do you think? Do you have any
Does
thoughts
the
on whether?
Yeah, I mean, like if you do the podcast, the podcast will get in the can and then maybe an article about it. It would be weird to maybe tailor your podcast around the article. I don't know, Mark, what
I agree. I think the podcast first, right? We can have the discussion because we won't really know until we have that discussion and talk. And that way you'll develop themes and you can then kind of do an article that recaps some of the, important themes from the podcast. So
Yeah,
I think we can do that.
okay.
I've started doing that a lot. Got somebody, it's not that hard to listen to the podcast and do a short article.
Okay.
So that's somebody that, I think that's the right order.
Yeah, so in the least, I think, I would hope that a lot of women attorneys would be interested in listening. And so then the next question is, how can we market it or promote it so that people know to listen to it? And can we do a blast to everybody?
And so that is something that we discussed a little bit last quarter or in the fourth quarter was, we have had discussions with, a company that helps manage and produce and, market podcasts. And they actually work with the lap board, on their podcast on some things. And they've offered to help with us at a rate that, either free or reduced rate to help with us on that. We just had, that is, and so we need to engage with the CEO of that company to, go, start that up again. I think the IT turnover and the database stuff kind of put that on the burner for the winter, but that's something that they will provide us with that help that takes content, takes clips from it, creates images and kind of does a bigger job of promoting it than what we do now for the podcast that we send out. And so I think that's a really good idea and solution that we probably need to take the podcast up to another level where actually, we get consistent listeners, is that it's marketed better. I think the product is good. We just don't really market it enough to get it seen or heard.
Catherine just pointed out that in August, the National Women's Day is on August 9th, right? We might
Timing
be
it
able
around
to
that's a good
try
idea,
to-
yeah.
to that. And when we talk about a podcast, could we consider maybe doing a YouTube interview instead? I don't know. I'm just thinking that if you're sitting at your desk and you're eating lunch and you can just click on something and watch an interview, that might be
Well,
more.
yeah, all of these are done on Zoom, so we have, and I record them, so I have the videos. And so it is something that we could do. The only issue there is the editing of that because, we'd have to edit those videos in the same way we edit the audio. But that seems to would be doable. We have the video, we just need to edit it to when we make edits of taking things out or removing things, we'd have to equally do the same with the video. And I think that's something we could do.
All right, well, I guess behind the scenes, we can try to figure that out and.
I guess that's just something we need to make sure that the participants are aware that we're going to do that part too, so they can be presenting themselves in the way that they want.
But not wear shorts, right?
unlikely with that. Yeah. So if you're on both publications and
Yes.
communication, so maybe between which one you want to do it, maybe you're the best to pick, or you and Dorothy together or something, since you're on both, kind of what each does. Like, I'm not on publication, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean,
Which one's
honestly, to
needed?
me, it doesn't matter, but if everybody kind of is leaning towards the idea of doing the podcast first and then the article, that's fine.
I think that's
You
good.
know, I think the idea is we're trying to find content that works with the podcast that also might be a good article and, you know, in the publications or in the State Bar Journal, it's kind of like cross-marketing in a way. So if you didn't pick it up through the podcast, or if you listened to it and you were a little more interested in reading. So that's the idea.
Okay.
So if anybody, I mean, we're always looking for ideas. So if anybody can think of something that might work with that model, then just
The
let
podcast model?
yeah, the
article
podcast/article
Okay.
model, or just articles. We're just always looking for good ideas and, you know, it's just brainstorming.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you just have an idea or you know somebody and you can give us a lead, it's always helpful.
Okay. Yeah, did you want?
Yeah, this would just be a suggestion and a question, which is, can you embed links to the podcast in the journal when you send it digitally? That might be a good idea too. You know how a lot of and also, you know, a lot of articles now, you can listen to them. That, I know that would be a little bit different, but that could be cool too.
Yeah, I think that would be neat and is a great use, it'd be a great way to create podcasts by just saying this podcast is, you know, 3 articles from the journal. And there was a time in October where I actually picked up the journal and started reading it into a microphone and listened to it and said, that I'm not the right person for that. So, that's right.
If somebody knows a celebrity,
That's
we'll
right.
get a celebrity to write the articles.
I do want to say, so I am an active podcast listener. Alice knows at dinner last night, I was hyping the podcast. The podcast is great. I don't know if any of you guys have listened to it, but the recaps of the meetings is terrific. I think it could be great to send to our local bar association. Like we have the Wake County Bar an e-blast that goes out. So, you know, one of the things I think would be great for us is just to send it to our communications person and ask her to just drop it into that communication, and then it could go out with, so she could basically just elevate the podcast. But I did want to ask if Mark, I saw he's here, is going to continue to do it. Since he's not on the State Bar. Mark, I thought your interview with Gita was fantastic. I hope you'll continue to do.
Yes,
Are you gonna keep
I
doing
volunteer to be the permanent podcast.
Okay, this is great. I mean, you're really good at it.
I'm happy to do it.
Okay,
So,
that's great.
And so on your point, I think, Peter, you emailed the link last time, something about the podcast, which I then gave to our local bar administrators. and can you put the
I'll send that out.
last?
I'll send that out to the counselors.
Yeah, it's a good thing to
yeah,
do,
okay.
I think. So, okay. Anything else from publication?
No, other than we have this long-standing desire to find somebody who knows John Grisham, so. He has, because he has North Carolina ties. And so I feel like every meeting I have to just throw it out there because you never know when somebody.
What are his
might-
ties on?
Yeah, well,
What's his connection?
he has family in Chapel Hill, he writes, yeah. He has, I heard that he might have a house in Boone.
Well, I'll,
Do you have a connection?
I do.
Oh, see, you never know.
I do. I'm just, I wasn't aware this was an issue. One of my friends from Chapel Hill is from either Jackson, Mississippi. Is that where he's from? Where he's from in Mississippi?
Yeah.
No, that's not Oxford, I don't think. But anyway, she is now a professor at the law school down there. And she popped up on my LinkedIn the other day, and I hadn't thought about her in 30 years. So perhaps I should call her.
It's worth a try.
They're like childhood
It's like
buddies.
That
That's
would be,
cool.
if I can retire from the State Bar, having connected with John Grisham, so for the State Bar Journal, that would be like.
Agendas, you know. Okay, cool. All right, so,
Gina, I'll talk to you.
yeah, okay.
After the meeting. Okay.
Great. All right, so 2022 second quarter plan, Peter and or Brian.
Yeah, well, before you even touch on that, I want to let you all know that Bill Powers, who's joining us by Zoom, did mention that he'd be happy to help with the podcast. I know Bill has he does his own podcast and things of that nature. So just to keep him in mind if there's any way that he can assist as well. The second quarter plan, we're continuing to focus on the database portal. It's continuing to be developed and new features added. Like I said, we've the most recent thing that we've been experiencing with the portal has been the ability for folks applying for specialty certification to apply through the portal. I think it has made it a lot easier for applicants to get through there. And of course, we're going to be releasing recertification for both the certified paralegals as well as our specialists and things of that nature. As opportunities come up, and really, I think this is kind of maybe a question or request from you all, that if you hear of anything in your districts where folks say, I don't know how to do this, or I find this to be confusing with regards to the membership portal, let us know and see if there's something that we could do to create a video tutorial or something like that. I saw Bert raise his hand.
Yeah, I was giving Peter the eye. I'm part of the CLE board. Just something to think about. We're making a pitch on how we do CLE. It's going to be a big change for thousands of attorneys. I think it's a very positive and a good change. But we're going to have to get the word out. And essentially, instead of doing annual requirements, we're going to do requirements every 3 years. Is the pitch that we'll be making in front of the executive committee tomorrow. And
He's
so,
jumping us, Berber. That's letter C here on our.
oh, is it on there?
Yeah.
Oh, see, I didn't even know. Yeah, I'm just a guest, so, just a guest. Oh, I had no idea. I didn't look at the.
No, it's fine. No, you're right. Absolutely right. No, it's,
Well, now I know why I wasn't invited.
that's right. Yeah, so I mean, the portal, some of the bigger things that will be coming this year that we'll need to continue to promote is the law firm portal and CLE sponsor portals that we're developing. We have been pleasantly surprised with the fact that having the CLE and the dues all in one portal we're farther ahead on dues collection than we are normally at this time of year, because when people went in to do their annual report, they saw that they owed dues and were able to pay it at the same time. So I think that was a benefit of this. And we're in the middle of a development with the Office of Counsel section of that, which will I'm sure have a public facing or lawyer facing component as well. So that's still going strong. The second thing that we're working on this quarter that will have a benefit both directly to the council, but also to the public, is a project to work on our meeting agendas and minutes and the sharing and dissemination of those agendas and minutes with the public and with counselors, a better system than the SharePoint setup that we have now, better templates for meeting agendas and minute management to where we can have items move forward on various committees, track better, more consistent, and just a much better system for staff to create agendas and minutes and materials, but also the ability for people to sign up and kind of subscribe to getting these minutes and agendas sent to them when they're posted, so we can have public subscription. If I want to get the agendas when they're posted, they just sign up and it'll be automatically sent out to that distribution group. And the ability for board members and council members to access these materials better with easier and better board management. So that's a project that we've started, that they're in development of, that our goal with that project team is that we have something for you guys to use as a test in July, and that we're in full operation with that for the public and for you guys in October. So I think that's good.
As a person who struggles mightily with all of it, as you know, because you have to save me from time to time, when setting up this new system, is it going to be possible to break out things into folders as opposed to scrolling through 283 pages of old, new, you know what I mean?
Yes, actually, one of the things that they do in the agendas is that it's all hyperlinked. It will be all linked. So say you're on agenda item A, you could click it and it could jump you to that section of materials that you'll be able to look at. So we think that there'll be a lot of benefit for the people in the meetings and for people following and wanting to know what's going on.
think that's pretty
Yep.
much it as far as the second quarter plan.
Well, the CLE rule amendments, let me just touch on that again. I think that this is gonna be, depending on what happens the rest of this week, this will take up a lot of our time this quarter to get that communicated out, have some ability to receive comments, answer questions, present these to various districts who might want to have us come talk about what the changes are. This is a really big, significant change in the CLE setup. And so, and I think actually a positive change that lawyers will appreciate. So we want to get this out there and hear from them and see what comments we need, what changes we might need to make these better in the rulemaking process. So that's a big, that's going to be a big chunk of our time. The other thing we're going to have to do, and maybe it's through this committee or maybe through a different working group, is make sure we have a good strategy for how this transition is going to take place and that's well communicated to the lawyers later this year. Because there's one part that these are the new rules. We're also going to need to tell them, okay, switching from the old set to the new set, this is how this is going to work. This is what you need to do for your old rules. This is what you need to do for the new. Are we going to request that we waive any of the requirements from the old set of rules to switch to the new one? That whole transition is going to be a little difficult to manage. So we need, the CLE board is going to be, working on that, and we'll probably want to present our thoughts to you and kind of give an idea on how we should communicate that transition out as well later this year.
Can I ask a question? So I may be totally, the changes that now instead of doing your CLE report every year, you do every 3 years. But you report for the past 3 years, correct?
Right, you have requirements for 3 years, so you'd have to do 36 hours over 3 years. There won't actually be an annual report that you have to submit. We are eliminating that requirement. We're proposing to eliminate it so that if the system says you're compliant, you don't have to send in a form to say that you're compliant. We'll be sending periodic updates to the lawyer saying, check out your CLE record. Your record still shows you owe this many hours, but they're not going to have to, in February, go online and say, yes, this is right.
But every 3 years, we will still do that. Go online and say, yes, this is
No,
right.
you won't have to
So
do
what's
that.
the 3-year thing?
It's just you have to do your 36
can't
hours
wait
within 3
forever to
years.
do your- Oh.
And so if you don't do it, then you get
Oh,
a
I'm
fine, a
sorry.
penalty for not
So
doing
you
it.
could theoretically do all 36 in 1 year.
Yes,
You
that's
could,
the
that's
complaint
right.
that
That's,
we're
yeah,
getting
okay, now I'm with you.
From
Sorry.
lawyers. Well, now that means that we have to do all 36 credits in
In
of
2
the month.
weeks.
Oh,
Yeah.
so
Not.
What about
Every
our
weekend.
Board of Legal Specialization is blessed this session, because of course, your specialization requirements are by year.
Right. And well, and I guess that's the thing with the specialization requirements as far as the particular specialist having to complete their number of hours per year. I think that's going to be a separate thing. It does work with this proposal.
Okay, so they're not gonna change.
Yeah, the Board of Legal Specialization isn't
Okay.
changing, and I think, so I guess that's the thing, that specialists essentially have to, keep in mind, yes, I've got a 3-year reporting period for my general CLE requirements, but I do have specialization requirements, so I will need to make sure that I'm taking, whatever the specialty might be, not less than 6 hours per year in my particular area.
12 or 15.
yeah,
We need to communicate that to
Mhm.
people, because the ones who are hoping to be a specialist later need to know, if you sandbag and
Yeah.
wait to year 3, you will
Right.
not be
Right.
eligible for specialization.
Right.
So that needs to be real clear.
Well,
Yes.
and one thing I
And what
talked,
you want.
one thing I talked to Brian about earlier is I'd like to potentially on the website where you check your CLE hours every year, there be a block for specialist. Because now there isn't, and like you have to just, and it's not that hard, but it'd be nice to know, okay, it shows if you click on that, I've done my 6 for X year, I've done my 6 for this year, so it's separated out as opposed to, I just think it'd be one less record keeping thing for everybody.
We have the ability to, in the system, we have not yet kind of fully fleshed it out, but we do have the ability to say this qualifies for a specialty thing. And so we could, the issue is just going to be, thinking through that, because if you're taking a large course that only 1 hour of that qualifies for your specialty, how are we going to break that out to be able to track that? So it's there, it's possible. It's not something we can kind of turn on right away, because if they were only taking 1 hour courses, that'd be easy, because we could say this is a specialty eligible course.
Family law.
But if they're taking 5 hours and only one of them is a family law eligible hour, how do we denote that in the system? So we're still trying to figure that out, but I think that is probably somewhere we'll go in the future, for sure.
But you're right, I think we need to make sure, for, like I said, we can put it out in our newsletter to the specialists, that these rules have been proposed, or just the changes have been proposed, but you still have your specialty certification requirements. And I mean, I guess that's kind of going to the general notion of the purpose of the certification program, to improve the overall competency of the bar. And so it is something that you may still have annual requirements despite your generic CLE requirements being now on a 3-year cycle. So
Yeah.
we'll need to communicate that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, anything else on that, or, okay, so our next section is a presentation by Alice on message mapping. So the officers and I attend a lot of national conferences, and actually they're starting to be in person again. And these are with bar leaders of state bar organizations and local bar organizations. The majority of them are some kind of voluntary bar. And so a lot of the program tends to be geared towards maintaining membership or retaining members and getting new members. And so it's not necessarily applicable to us, but every once in a while, there's a little nugget of an idea or proposal that is something that's really good or potentially good for the state bar. This past spring, we attended the Bar Leadership Institute that the American Bar Association puts on in March in Chicago. And as a part of that, there was a presentation on message mapping. Darren and I were sitting next to each other, and they handed out this little chart you can see here. And I just started doodling on it while they were talking. And, so you're kind of listening, but also there's this filter of, is this just going to be something for voluntary bars? And the more I listened and the more I kind of doodled with it, the more I thought this makes a lot of sense for the state bar to do something like this. So the premise, and I think Brian found a lot of materials online about it. And the premise for it is described in the materials, and it's pretty simple. It's they say scientifically based process for developing the core statements that define an organization and assembling those statements in a framework that can be used to guide all public discussions, media interviews, speeches, presentations, as well as printed and electronic collateral publications, websites, etc. I don't think the state bar has ever done that. The message, I'll show you my message map. I guess I held it up. So the premise is that you figure out what is your core statement. And of course, our core statement, we say it all the time. We regulate the profession in the best interest of the public. And now that could be maybe phrased in a way that's, more, palatable or communicates better, but that's essentially what our core message is. And so then off of that, I put, we set and enforce high professional standards of conduct. That's on the enforcement side of things. We provide support and intervention to impaired lawyers. We collectively compensate victims of lawyer theft. So you essentially create a map that it's very easy for somebody who's making a presentation to follow and have it guide their presentation, make sure you're hitting the points that you want to hit in your presentation, emphasizing them. And then the map itself provides the kind of supporting documentation for it. And as this one has up here, it says how do you do those things? I really think it would be a very worthwhile endeavor for the communications committee to appoint a subcommittee to develop a message map that could be used by the officers, but also by the counselors, by the staff, whenever they're doing any kind of public communication process, whether it's, talking to the media or our social media stuff. I just think it's a really worthwhile endeavor. I don't know that it's all that difficult to do, but once you start working on it, you realize that you want to be conscious of the language that you use because you're trying to communicate with the public. So that's my recommendation, is that the communications committee look at doing that. And I think, the people who are appointed to that committee maybe should have some communications, publications experience, that would be helpful. Okay. thoughts on that? We can certainly, Dorothy's not here and she's the chair, so I figured we could maybe just get her input on that before we actually appoint the committee. Does that sound okay? Or what do you guys think? Do you want to go ahead and?
I think you could vote on the idea and then the chair would, those interested would contact. Dorothy.
Okay, how about that? Okay. So why don't we do that? Do I hear a motion? Is there a motion? Or first, any questions about this committee, subcommittee?
I would just say, I think it's a great idea. I did a webinar recently on crisis communication, and one of the key things is always figuring out what your message is. So I think it'd be helpful. You never know what crisis is around the corner. It'd be helpful to have that message map as one of those tools to make sure you're staying on message when you're dealing with whatever PR issue comes up. So I think it could be helpful in that regard. So I think it's a great idea to have that map handy
Right.
so people can use it and be on the same page. It sounds smart.
Other thoughts on it? Yes.
So I have one, and I don't think anybody here is on PMBR, but we used, NC State has marketing majors, graduate and undergraduate, and we use them to assist in marketing the PMBR, and we saw their presentation last night. And I think we paid them $1,000. It was worth it. You've got kids, and I don't mean that in a demeaning term, but people who look at things differently. And they came up with a ton of options that we would never have even known. And so I say this in conjunction with this idea, not that you should necessarily use them to assist in the idea, but I think that we should use them consistently with the communications committee, because our subcommittees are great and we can add substance, but actual delivery is a different story. They gave us a very clear marketing map of how to launch. That would take, the staff here, I'm sure, a couple of weeks just to find the time to do it. And they came up and they said, here are different things that you can do, templates, you add in the information. So whether we use it for the message mapping to have that or continue to use them, I think it's worth it from a standpoint of finding cost-effective things. They came up with options for how we can use the program and probably not even spend maybe $100, $150 a month. And I thought it was great. And so to the extent that we can incorporate that with message mapping, especially because it could be so significant to what our marketing plan is, I think that would be something to consider as well.
Is there do you have, well,
I do.
we get the contact from you for the state kids. Okay, all right. That's
And
good.
technically, we gave them a donation.
That's right. That's true. We
$1,000.
donated.
The recommended donation.
Yes.
So they
That's
actually
right.
do this free.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Any other discussion about a message mapping subcommittee or message mapping in general? Is there potentially a motion out there about a subcommittee formation? Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to form the subcommittee or second.
Motion and a second. All in favor? Any opposed? So the word will be anyone, we'll start with this idea. Anyone interested can contact Dorothy if they would like to be on the subcommittee. And then we'll go from there, see what kind of info she gets, what kind of contacts she gets. Okay.
Yeah, and think of, anyone potentially outside of this committee who might be a good one to have on there as an advisor.
Okay, awesome. All right, is there any further business? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second?
Second.
We're done. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
Bye, Bill. Bye, Everett.
Bye, everyone. Take care. Get better.